Welcome to the Education Marketing Leader podcast with Chris Raposo. If you're looking to dive into the latest industry insights, draw inspiration from education success stories, or just want to sharpen your marketing skills, you're in the right place. Here, we bring you a diverse range of voices from experts and leaders in the field, offering you a unique blend of professional development and practical strategies. Whether you want to understand your audience better, stay updated with the latest tech trends in marketing, or expand your professional network, we've got you covered. So while you're driving on your morning commute or winding down after a busy day, let's explore the dynamic world of education marketing together.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Education Marketing Leader with Chris Raposo. Today, my guest is Beth Noël. She is the Director of Communications and Creative Services at Middlesex Community College. Beth, welcome to the show.
Chris, thank you so much for having me.
It's good to have you. So I met Beth recently in the Big Easy at the NCNPR National Conference in New Orleans, where she was part of a very insightful panel discussion, very timely on the recent events and the political climate in the United States as it relates to higher education. Really got a lot out of it. We touched base after the fact, and we're going to talk a little bit more about accessibility in higher education, this time higher education websites particularly, and redefining accessibility through a neurodiverse lens. So Beth, let's get into it. Are you ready?
I'm ready, Chris.
Awesome. So you've championed a shift from traditional accessibility. Some people are aware of it, like me, to what you also call neuroaccessible communications. And you wrote a fantastic LinkedIn article about it, which I will tag in the show notes as well. But what prompted you to make that distinction? How did your personal experience shape that journey?
Sure. And that's a great question. And my answer is really simple. It comes down to shared humanity. And so when we connect with someone who is different and we truly listen to their experience and we can identify ways that we're similar, it makes it really hard for us to ignore someone else's experience and their challenges. And for me, this became real life a few years ago when my 17-year-old was starting to apply to colleges. And we went into the application process knowing that they're a neurodivergent kid. And I thought, being somebody who worked in higher ed for over 20 years, that I could help them get through the application process. They're a smart kid, dual enrollment, extracurriculars, but they couldn't get through the websites of the schools that they were looking at. I was getting frustrated, so I tried to lean into that common humanity, and I sat them down and we had a real frank conversation about, where are you getting stuck? Why is this frustrating? And it really came down to the content was designed for non-neuro folks, and that they just were getting stuck in particular places. And it made me stop and look at my own institution's website and look at how we were communicating. And it became clear that we can do better. And so that's really what started me down this path of neuro-accessible communications and really looking to create ways that my team can positively impact the student experience for those folks.
Yeah, and you like you mentioned, the website was created for non-neuro folks, probably by non-neuro folks, and there may have not even be ill intent there. It just may have been some ignorance there, and that's why we're having this conversation today, to shed a light on that as well and help people along their way.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. So actually recently, like you talked about walking a mile in someone else's shoes and figuring out how they operate and how they see websites from their perspective. So I recently was on a webinar given by a gentleman who was blind, from his perspective, navigating a website. And I've known about web accessibility for quite a few years now, but I've never seen it from a different person's perspective who actually needs a screen reader to navigate. And I just felt how painful it was when the website isn't accessible for everyone. So I have a whole new appreciation for accessibility. That's regular web accessibility. We're going to touch on neuro accessibility in this particular angle, but still having somebody that you walk along with on that journey and see what they're going through is really eye-opening.
Absolutely.
So most campus accessibility initiatives focus on physical and sensory barriers. There are certain criteria laid out by the ADA, so that's why people are following that. But what do you think neurodivergent needs have been overlooked? Why have they been overlooked so long in higher education and marketing?
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons. One is the ADA guidelines don't specifically mention cognitive disorders or differences. They're really focused on that content that would be hard for someone who has a physical limitation to use. So things like captions, things like screen readers being able to access the content. And although neuro and cognitive differences are covered by the ADA, it's not spelled out. And so I think for higher ed institutions, having worked in many for quite a long time now, you just want to get to that checklist. You just want to be able to say we are compliant, right? And I think another reason is some of these cognitive disorders and differences aren't visible. And I like to use this analogy. When you're on a bus and if somebody gets on the bus with you and they have a cane, their disability is front and center. You see that, and as a human, onus is on you to respond, and you will probably get up and offer them your seat. But if somebody is on the bus who has a cognitive difference and their challenges aren't necessarily visible, then things that would be challenging for them are just going to be ignored because we don't see them, right? So things like sensory issues, or if we do see something like someone stimming, making a repetitive motion for their self-soothing and self-redirection, we might think it's weird, right? Oh, they're just weird. And so I think we often think of these cognitive differences really as personality issues instead of, no, this person has a real reason for them to interact with the world differently. And then there's also the stigma, right? So we know that about a third or 33% of adults in the United States self-identify as being neurodivergent. So whether that's autism, ADHD, OCD, anxiety, there's a whole host of them. So that means that about a third of our school students and employees are neurodivergent. And we also know that only about 8% of students disclose to their disability service office. So that's a big group of folks that we are just, unintentionally missing because there's stigma, and we don't really talk about cognitive differences as being normal. We talk about them as being a deficit.
So now let's address that. If only 8% disclose that, there's a different issue there with acceptance as well. Let's just not even think about the website, right? Think about on campus, people talking with one another. How do you address that? How do you normalize that? How do you shine a light on that and help people that may be afraid to say the wrong things or act the wrong way with people that have these particular issues? How do you open that conversation and that dialogue?
Yeah, I think, I am very lucky that I work at an institution and our mission is focused on equity and belonging. So I have been very lucky that I've been able to pair not only accessibility as a component of belonging, but neuroaccessibility as well. And so it's something that we just have in our daily conversations around campus. A good portion of my day every day is communicating with folks around the institution about how we need to make a change to something because it's not accessible. And then there's an education component that comes with that. But there definitely is a stigma. I bet if your listeners and your viewers were to think critically about the people they work with, they probably can make some assumptions about who might be neurodivergent in their circle, but that person doesn't feel comfortable enough to say anything, right? So one of the ways that I talk about this here at my institution is I tell the story of my kid and their application process, but I also tell the story of my mom, who was diagnosed with ADHD at 78 years of age. So they have gone their whole life feeling out of place, feeling like technology was a struggle, having a hard time keeping track of things. It wasn't until they were retired that they were actually given a diagnosis. And so I think if we can share more of our own stories, back to that first comment of shared humanity, we can start to change the dynamic in our circles around this negative stigma that exists for people who are cognitively different.
Absolutely. Yeah, 78 years without being diagnosed, that's tough. That's a long time
A
to
very long.
feel, you know, even if she knew about it, she knew about it herself, but she may have not known what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we just definitely want to avoid that. Now, most compliance standards target physical accessibility, like we mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think needs to change on how to define or regulate accessibility in higher education? Should it come from the federal level, or do we have to start in our own backyard with leadership at the institution?
Yeah, I mean, I think in today's current landscape, starting at the federal level might be somewhat difficult, especially with the recent language that has come out from our Department of Human and Health Services in Washington that autism is not real. So I think it would be hard to start at that level now. But I think we can all at our own institutions start to do some grassroots groundwork around this. It's actually an easy lift to start incorporating some small changes into your work that will make your content more neuro-friendly. And that will also help with the stigma, right? If it just becomes commonplace. Eventually, I would love to see ADA law language change to include information about making sure that the content is also accessible to neuro-different folks. That, will take an act of Congress. So again, it's the current landscape. It might be tough to change policies federally, but it's definitely something I think as institutions of higher learning, we can do now on our own campuses and in our own departments.
Yeah, and it's not like, even if it doesn't come from the federal level, it's not like it's forbidden. You can make a change. You can be a change agent in your own backyard and change culturally within your community, and that may spread throughout your county, throughout your state, and then nationally as well. I mean, dream big, and if it's a worthy pursuit and definitely well worth the effort. With leaders like you on the helm, I have hope for that as well. But let's talk some practical applications for the people that want to make a change there. What are some key principles or filters that your team now uses when creating neuro-accessible communications on your campus?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Where do you start, right? And one of the challenges that I think that exists with creating neuroaccessible content versus accessible content is that when there's a physical complication or difference that we need to accommodate, one size kind of fits all, right? So you could be a pregnant woman, you could be someone who is paralyzed and in a wheelchair, you could have a broken leg, or you could be elderly, and the elevator will work for all of you, right? But with the neuro differences, they are so vast. And even today, more research is coming out that there's a spectrum. Even for ADA, there's a spectrum. So how does one change work for everyone? And I think the biggest bit of advice I have for institutions that want to start doing this is to start rethinking how you approach the work from the beginning. To take something that already exists and retrofit it to be neuroaccessible is, for me, kind of missing the point. My team has a motto that says that accessibility isn't steps you've forgotten, it's steps you've missed. We have to go back to the beginning with these projects. We've really leaned into the good old communication basics, journalism 101. Write for an audience for whom English is not their first language. Write for an audience who has an 8th grade education. I encourage all of your listeners to take their content from their website and or any of their marketing materials and put it through AI and have it rated on the complexity of the content. Because in higher ed, we almost always write for people with master's degrees. So even just starting by going back to communication and journalism basics is a great place to start. And put the most important information at the top. Don't bury the 3 things you need someone to do at the bottom of the page. Lean into emphasis like bolding, use bullets. And these are techniques that we should be doing anyway because it benefits everybody. But it's, again, often something that as higher ed communicators, we don't focus on right away because we're focusing on meeting everyone's needs, from the nursing department to human resources to admissions to, our communications have to do it all. And so I will say it has been challenging to get buy-in from everyone at the institution because it is requiring us to rethink how we communicate. And we're working on it. Education is the nail that I hang my hat on when I go into the room for these conversations, is that we are an institution of higher learning, and so we can never stop. And so now let's learn about neurodiversity.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for tuning into the episode today. I hope you're enjoying it so far. This episode is brought to you by StayMates, a full-service marketing agency servicing colleges and universities throughout the country. For more than 40 years, StayMates has helped higher ed institutions strengthen their brands, launch digital campaigns, and drive measurable enrollment growth. From audience research and content strategy to digital design and accessibility, StayMates brings deep expertise and a practical, results-driven approach to every engagement. Looking for a partner who really gets higher education? Learn more at staymates.com. Again, this is staymates.com for more information. And now, back to the episode. Yep, exactly. The quote you said earlier, accessibility isn't an extra step, it's a step you've missed. It's actually your banner image. I noticed that on your LinkedIn, so I really like that. Yeah, also when you mentioned, I hear the push towards an 8th grade reading level more and more out there. I've taken some workshops and courses on email marketing as well and web copy. And like you said, right, place of higher education, place of business, we feel like we need to elevate our speech and make us sound smarter than or as smart as we think we are.
Yeah.
But then again, even if you have a master's or a PhD, right, when you digest something from a web copy, you want to be able to easily digest it and just flow with it without having to go through the dictionary and look up certain words, right, that you may or may not know or forgotten. So the easier it is to read, the better it is to get your message across.
Yeah, absolutely. And there have been lots of studies, Chris, about digital reading and reading on a screen, right? And the research shows that the average human only reads about 18 to 20% of the words on a screen. So that's the phone or your laptop, tablet. And if you think about that, that is not a lot. That's less than a third of the words. So making your content shorter, clearer, using bullet lists, creating white space makes it easy for everyone to read, but also really helps those neurodivergent folks.
Absolutely. In your piece, you've written that what's good for everyone is good for business. If so, at times with leadership in higher education businesses, you have to make the business case, to create the change. And I've read somewhere that it's almost like $1 trillion buying power from disabled folks out there on the internet and the elderly. So you got to make sure that you catch that audience as well and not have them go somewhere else to a competitor who is accessible. So can you share from your experience real examples where neuroaccessible design improved engagement or clarity for all audiences, not just neurodiverse students?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the best and easiest examples for us neurotypical folks to think about relates to captions and videos, right? If any of your listeners have younger folks who are on social media or YouTube, you have walked in the room and seen them using captions, right? And so captions are required by the ADA for people who are hard of hearing, but they're also a supremely helpful tool for neuro folks as well. It could be that a student is in a classroom and there's a video that is playing, but there's something really distracting happening, right, in the side of the room that a neurotypical person can filter out. So having that video in class also include the captions could be just the very thing that makes the content easier to understand and more digestible for that neurodivergent student. Things like checklists and next steps. One of the things that we did with our website redesign that we launched last November is we have next steps listed on all of our main web pages. And these are steps that give the neurodivergent user a list of what they can expect and what they could start doing after they complete that call to action. One of the things that we know is that complex information like financial aid and admissions can cause stress to a normal person, right? Let alone somebody who can't focus on the content because of how it's presented. So using the next steps can lower anxiety, right? And it gives you as a communicator some leverage to say to the content owners, I know you think that's really important to have at the top of the page, but we really need the student to first download the FAFSA guidelines we made and make an appointment. After that, we can give them the next step of, these are the things that you need to prepare for your FAFSA. This is the additional content you should look at. So that's one way that making those changes can be really helpful, because that also helps everyone. Everyone could use next steps. Great, I filled out the FAFSA, now what do I do? And the more that we can make our content, particularly our web content, more streamlined and easier for everyone, you're then going to be a standout institution. Your content is going to be easier for mom and dad to sit down with their student and work through than, the competitor school that's the town over. And that's going to increase enrollments and hopefully will also increase retention at your institution, right? Because then when that student needs to pay the bill and that mom and dad have a question about financial aid, they know that they're going to have a clear site that is presenting the content in a real actionable, easy to understand way.
That's right. That's right. Especially with the enrollment cliff coming up, you have to, not just focus on your traditional age students, but also the first generation students, the students that are adult learners, and the students of people that were immigrants. Like, for example, their English or their language English isn't their first language, right? And if you have parents helping them with it, especially in the Hispanic community, where everything's communal, where everybody's doing things together, making sure that mom and dad feel comfortable about especially financial aid, knowing the next step, not missing a step, because they may make that leap of faith to send their son or daughter to the university, and it's going to be the first in their family. They mentally make that first step. Last thing that they want is drop the ball on a document, right? Where then their child doesn't get into school at a particular time that they're committed to, and then may lose the courage to continue with that. So
yeah,
don't want to drop the ball there either. So, and then like you said, if you do that, then your school is going to be that standout school, and word travels everywhere. So you built yourself a good reputation. These parents talk to their friends about Middlesex Community College, being on par with everything that they needed, making sure that their friends' kids give it a look as well. Just helps
Exactly.
the school.
Exactly.
All around,
Clear information benefits everyone.
Absolutely. Neurodiversity, we talked about it, ranges from autism, ADHD, dyslexia, PTSD, and anxiety. How do you balance creating inclusive content without falling into the one-size-fits-all design traps?
Yeah, I think, one of the approaches that is helpful is being flexible. Offer as many different ways to engage with the content as you can. So whether that is having checklist or next steps in your content, but also if it's, let's say, the financial aid website, portion of your site, maybe you offer a how-to video, right? You have the steps there in writing, which is great, but then also provide a quick, 2-minute tutorial for folks to watch. YouTube is the second largest search engine on the planet. Folks go there for help, right? So maybe you add videos to your site. If the content needs to be really dense, and this is financial aid I keep mentioning because it is complicated. There's so many legal requirements that schools have around this stuff. So if you can't make the copy smaller, if you have to have all of this language, prepare the reader ahead of time. Put information at the top of the page saying that this information may be complicated. Give yourself extra time to work through it. Encourage the student to find a quiet place to sit down and, remove distractions before they start the process of filling out the application. Give them that heads up, because that right there, if a student is going, oh, well, if it's going to take extra time, I'm not going to do it right now in study hall. I'm going to wait till I go home and mom gets home from work and we can do it together. That right there could change that student's experience drastically and make them say, all right, I feel comfortable with this institution, instead of trying to get it done and getting frustrated.
Yeah, I love this. With recent internet articles, it always tells me like this is a 15-minute read, or this is a 7-minute read, right? So you can get prepared, because if I don't want to start something and then halfway through I'm like, okay, I gotta go somewhere and I can't finish it. It's frustrating. And the other thing, how-to videos are so relatable to me. I just recently made a job change, and we used to use Google Docs for everything, right? Shared docs. And now I'm with a company where we use SharePoint. And I wasn't sure how to share a folder publicly. And of course, I typed it in. It gave me all these articles, but I didn't feel like reading. I'm like, can I get a video? A minute and a half, just show me the step by step and get it over with, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
So
We are a video generation. Video is ubiquitous with life now. So lean into that. Use that as an extra tool in your communicator tool belt. Read the article here, and at the bottom, click this link to access a video synopsis.
Yes, and what you mentioned earlier with the videos and the captions. Captions is the cool thing now, actually. When you see the short form videos, the shorts, like those captions pop, pop, pop. I do that all the time with the recap of the podcast episodes. When I do a 1-minute clip, like for this episode, for example, I'm going to do a 1-minute clip to promote this episode on LinkedIn, and I'll be sure to have captions on there in nice bright colors so everybody can see it, but it kind of flows over the screen as well. So it's not just for, to make it accessible. It's like people expect it nowadays, and the kids especially, when they watch their YouTube or TikTok videos.
Yes, absolutely.
You mentioned earlier, when you have the change management, when you talk to people about making websites more accessible, you go into the room with an educator's mindset. Can you share what kinds of internal educational trainings have you done to bring your campus community along, and what worked and what resonated?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first step was getting my staff all on board. And luckily, I have some folks on my team who are neurodivergent, and they felt comfortable disclosing that to the team. And that made a huge impact on those on my team that are neurotypical, because they then felt as though they could lean in and ask further questions. Hey, do you think that this is too complicated? Right? And it created some more collaboration on my team, which was a fantastic side effect. But really, it was getting my folks educated first. And so finding professional development opportunities, LinkedIn Learning. I also regularly do professional development on the campus for not just my team, but everyone, where we talk about how to make your email more accessible, or how to make your page more accessible, how to make your fact sheet more accessible. So I do these regularly. And I also recommend readings to folks. So I'm going to hold up this book that's really cool. Is That Clear? And it is, you can see it's really thin. It's a super short guide, and you can get it on Amazon. And it's written for somebody who is a neurotypical thinker, to help them better communicate with someone who is autistic. But the tips in the book really can apply to all sorts of cognitive differences. And it's something that my team had to all read the book. It's super easy to understand, and it's even visually easy. And so I know my senior designer walked away with some extra tips for herself to implement in the design of communications as well, to make them just extra friendly for neuro users. So I say start with that book. Another great avenue for higher ed institutions is your disability services team, right? Your TRIO programs. You have folks at your institution who are working directly with neuro students all the time, right? They're working with them with IEPs, they're getting scribes for them, they're getting more time on tests, all sorts of accommodations. They have a wealth of knowledge and information too. And the tips that they give faculty to use when faculty is creating a syllabus or teaching really is the same stuff that the communications team can use. So really using that arm of your institution to help bolster your team's data and education is supremely helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, good thing that you mentioned those trio programs, because the literature is there, just I don't know where to find it, right? And if you don't know, you don't know. So it's also good for leadership to communicate that to the team so they can find those subject matter experts on the particular topic.
Yeah, absolutely.
What metrics or signals of success do you look for when assessing whether your communications are true neuroaccessible, not just compliant, but effective?
Yeah, that's a really good question because there aren't a lot of tools out there to help with this. So certainly in your marketing materials, you have web metrics, you've got email metrics, and if you're seeing an increase in engagement, that anecdotally can certainly be related to the clearer communications that you're creating. But I think a way that I would strongly encourage institutions to assess this would be to talk to students. Again, lean into your disability services team and get some students together, give them some pizza. We all know in higher ed our students love food. And sit down with students and ask them to review your content. Was this helpful? Are we missing the mark? Is this confusing? They're the end users, so getting their input can be supremely helpful. I think there's also ways that you can go about auditing your content. So at the conference in New Orleans, I did a presentation on how to create neuro-friendly communications. And I do have an auditing tool that I use here with my team. And I'm happy to share that with you, and you can drop that link in the notes. But start by looking at your existing content. Is the communication written for somebody with an 8th grade education, right? Mm-hmm. Do you have visual aids that are supporting the content, or are they a distraction from the content? So I think that is also another great place to start. And if you can go through that audit and check off, oh wow, so there's 10 items here that I need to look at, and our school is doing 5 of them, that's a good way to know that you're on the right track.
Yeah. I would love to get that link for that auditing tool for the audience to check out.
Absolutely.
As we land the plane, for institutions just starting this work, where should they begin?
Education, as I said, this book is that clear, is super helpful. The audit, so that you really know where you are with your communications. You might be doing a better job than you think, which would be great. And then looking at the data, right? Getting information from the neurodivergent community. There's lots of folks out there who do research to this population and have lots of information, as you said, about how different folks can contribute to the economy, how the elderly can contribute, disabled folks. Getting that information together and then getting in front of your senior leadership. It will be much easier for you at your institution if you have your colleges or universities cabinet on the same page with you. And once they see the data and they say, oh, this could be helpful at this challenging time of declining enrollments, get some professional development funds released so that you and your team can start to do some education around this, learn how to use the tools that they already have better, and then how to take that knowledge and then translate it to the folks that you work with.
Awesome. Great insights shared, Beth. Thank you so much. Tell us a little bit about Middlesex Community College and how people can get in touch with you to continue the conversation.
Sure. I would love for any of your listeners to send me an email. Middlesex Community College is based out of Massachusetts. We've got 2 campuses. One is in a gateway city, which is predominantly that student population is mostly immigrant based. And then we also have a campus that is a 4-year picturesque school that has been in many movies that is in Bedford. And you can hit me up on my email, noelb@middlesex.edu. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always sharing information about all things equity and accessible, and I'd love to continue the conversation with you.
Good. I'll be sure to tag you in the show notes so people can find you easily. Beth, super insightful. Like I said, thank you so much for being part of the show.
I am so happy to have been here. Thank you, Chris.
Take care. And that's a wrap for this episode, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to Education Marketing Leader Podcast this week. If you enjoyed this episode, Be sure to share it with your friends and your network. And if you ever thought about starting your own podcast, now that you listen to one and you got inspired, reach out to me via DM. We'd love to help you launch your own. We'll take care of everything for you, the scripting, the strategy, the editing, the distribution. All you have to do is show up, connect with your audience, and build your personal brand. So if you're ready for it, let's chat. And for everybody else, we'll see you next time at the Education Marketing Leader Podcast. Take care, friends.